I literally remember being at the stadium, seeing the lineups come through and going, oh my God, we've got a chance.
Yeah.
Like, we've got an absolute massive chance. I remember saying it beforehand. I remember saying it, what if our biggest chance here is Pep, almost Pep's himself.
Steven, Zach, welcome to a rematch. Your first appearance on the show, and today we've got a big one. As you are a Manchester City fan, and Zach, you are a Chelsea fan, I thought, what more fitting a game to go and review, unfortunately for you, but very fortunately for yourself.
Say that again.
The Champions League final of 2021. A final that I feel is kind of forgotten, mostly because of the context around the game, the time period as well, too. And maybe not the most memorable game either, but Chelsea, of course, ran out 1-0 victors. And this was the COVID final. I think that's the way we really remember it. I'll start with you, Steven, right? You guys obviously won the league here in the midst of, was this the first year of your four-peat?
Yes, Diaz had just joined, so Ruben Diaz went to win 4 in a row, and that was his first one, yeah.
And that City season was interesting, right? Because you started the year a little shaky, and of course the Ruben Diaz signing was such a huge catalyst for, as you were telling me off camera, that 21-game unbeaten run that you went on to eventually win the league, and I think in pretty... no one really challenged you that season, despite United coming second. But the real story was appearing in the Champions League as a City team that for years were trying to make that final jump and finally make the step into becoming European champions, had finally got the furthest they ever had, and they made it to the Champions League final that year. The run, tell me a little bit about that. Obviously, the PSG game is the one that stands out for me, but any other ones in that run that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was more about getting to the final, because previously we hadn't got past the quarters.
Yeah.
And we won, even when we won the league under Mancini, we couldn't get out of the group stages. So you have to learn how to be in the Champions League, and I think obviously in the benefit of hindsight now, you have to learn how to win it as well. It took us an awful lot of time to get to that point, and the feeling, when we got to the final, given the form, 21 wins in a row, I think we were like 28 unbeaten away from home, something stupid like that. It was ridiculous. Yeah. We were exceptionally confident, and we'd beaten Mönchengladbach in the quarters, Dortmund in the semis. Dortmund, of course, at the time.
I think it was Dortmund in the quarters. Like
quarters, sorry.
PSG
yeah, Dortmund,
in the semis. Yeah.
Mönchengladbach, in this last 16, then Dortmund in the quarters. They had like Bellingham and Haaland at the time as well, so they were the golden boys.
Was it that period? Yeah,
yeah, it was. Yeah. Haaland got assist for Bellingham, I think, in one of the games.
Is that the one where Bellingham fouled Ederson but didn't really foul him and you got it anyways?
No, it was a cynical challenge. It was awful.
How did Ederson recover?
Questionable, very questionable.
But either way, with a better team, if it was 4-1 in that group.
Yeah, you were definitely.
And then of course PSG, but that was a real watershed moment for City, because we'd struggled to get past the quarters, and suddenly we're in the final, and City were playing. It was such a weird season, we were actually at one point like mid-table, and we'd obviously lost the league to Liverpool the season before emphatically, and it was an Aguero-less team with injuries, and we'd sort of developed this false nine hybrid system where all these wonderfully gifted players were just flitting in and out the middle of the pitch with Mahrez, Bernardo, Gundogan, De Bruyne, Foden. It was an awful lot of fun, and it felt so absurd but so brilliant at the same time, and we got to the final entirely on merit. We were a sensational side doing wonderful things, and then we'll talk about the final, I'm sure, over the next hour or so. But yeah, it was a big moment for City, and if I'm being totally honest, I think everyone, even the club, everyone expected City was going to win, so it was a humbling experience.
Now, Zach, Chelsea's journey to the Champions League final this season was entirely different. I mean, you actually started the season with Frank Lampard in charge, coming off honestly a pretty positive season the year before. I think when you look into the context of Chelsea having a transfer ban and a young manager coming in and finally giving academy players a chance, there was a lot of optimism going into Lampard's second season, and especially when he brought in Thiago Silva, Werner, Kai Havertz, players with huge names around them at the time. There was an expectation that Chelsea might even go on and challenge for the league. But very quickly, that fell apart, and Lampard almost seemed to lose control of the situation. This was especially as well too under Roman. Unfortunately, Chelsea's favorite son was out the door, and in his place came Thomas Tuchel. And I remember particularly at the time when Tuchel came in, a lot of people questioned it because his reputation after leaving PSG had been a bit tarnished because there was this whole talk about could he manage egos and had he maybe fallen off. And people looked at the Chelsea team and thought, well, what is he going to change in 6 months' time? But very quickly, he introduced this new system. He started playing three at the back. Chelsea's results seemed to improve. They brought in players, or not even bringing players. There were players coming into the fray, like a Rudiger, for example, who seemed
Alonso,
completely out the back door under Frank Lampard. And all of a sudden, they themselves found themselves in a Champions League final. And now your route was completely different, if you want to talk a little bit about that. But
yeah, I mean, Chelsea were under Tuchel in the Champions League. And, I think you have to give credit to Lampard as well, at least getting us out of the group stages.
Yeah.
Clubs can really screw that up. But Chelsea in the knockout stages, were really difficult. Like Tuchel made us a really strong defensive unit, and you mentioned Rudiger came into the fold, and that was such a crucial piece of the puzzle for Tuchel's system. Alonso came back as well. Like I remember there being a huge bust up with him and Frank Lampard post West Brom game when we were wearing that like red and blue kit. If you guys can think back to that Chelsea third or away kit, and there were a few players that basically came into this side and really struggled with. Or came back and really found their feet actually under Thomas Tuchel. I think there was a lot of questions as well to some of the new boys that were brought in January, and again Tuchel kind of managed to get them working in some way for the system, and he also got some really good stuff out of the academy graduates. Like Reece James was like one of, if not the best right wing back in the world at that point. Mason Mount was playing fantastically well. It feels mad to kind of talk about Mount as someone who was so crucial to Chelsea's knockout football, to compare him now to where he's at United and he's so injury prone. But he was, like, I remember him on the turn against Porto scoring an incredible goal. And like Chelsea did have a tough route.
Wasn't he player of the season as well?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Chelsea had Porto, they had Real Madrid, they had Atletico Madrid. Giroud, I think, scores a bicycle kick in that game as well, in one of the games in the lead up. Like, it wasn't an easy run. I remember Chelsea drawing Real Madrid and thinking, oh God, like this doesn't happen. Chelsea don't play Real Madrid. Never happens. I was thinking, great, we've got the Champions League team. They always make it to the final, don't they? They always make it, and we absolutely schooled them. Like, we played them off the park, and we were really, really impressive. And that was one of the things that I think Chelsea were really good at, and Tuchel was really good at, was coming up against one opposition, analysing them, finding the weak point, and using his team to really go at them. And I think you saw a lot of success in the build-up for that. And then, we get to the final. And I think you're right when you were saying it earlier, Chelsea fans thought City were going to win. Like, we would get, of course, every fan, you have the hope, you're never going to admit it. But I think deep down, if you ask Chelsea fans going into that final, how was it? How was the feeling? How was it? Keep in mind, just a couple of weeks beforehand, Chelsea only qualified for the Champions League because Spurs lost. That was the only reason, or because Spurs got a negative result. We lost to Aston Villa on that day. And I remember thinking, God, we don't want the extra pressure of the only way we get into the Champions League next season is winning the Champions League itself.
You've already gone through that.
yeah, very true. And so, there was a lot of narratives. I think like there was a good team being built there. I think fans kind of, Thomas Tuchel had a really tough position to take over from Frank Lampard. Like, any Chelsea fan and any real like Premier League fan knows what Frank Lampard means to Chelsea. This is the all-time top goal scorer. This is somebody who fans were so happy to have. And to be honest, you ask match-going fans when he got sacked, raging, absolutely raging. They would have been 15th finishing with him manager and still want him there.
Sorry to interrupt, right? I think it's actually interesting you bring that up because I think it's a good point. I often mention Mikel Arteta's time at Arsenal and question if his time at Arsenal when he was struggling had come outside of COVID with match-going fans, would he have been given the necessary time to do what he's done? I think you could ask the same question about Lampard.
Yeah.
If he's coaching and struggling with the entire stadium around him, it's not like they were in the bottom half of the table. Do you think maybe that support from the match-going fans maybe keeps him in the job?
It might have helped him. I mean, the other thing is like it's Roman Abramovich. Like, ultimately, the only person that cares and that matters is it was him in that period. But Tuchel did have a really tough job to come in and take over from that. And to be honest, I don't know if any other manager in the world would have done the same kind of job. Like, okay, maybe Pep Guardiola, of course, but like would have been able to have come in under that pressure, say the right things. That was one of the things he did so well. People were all up against Chelsea and all this kind of stuff, and were wanting Chelsea to do badly, and he would always kind of do this thing, and even post that as well when the charges came, and he would say to the Champions League, if I've got to go and drive this bus for all of us to get there, like he made it very much. I think he took the squad and kind of said it's an us v them. The whole world is against you. Yeah, exactly, and I think the squad kind of took that underdog. And Chelsea, to be fair at times, I think Chelsea always kind of perform better when they're the underdog, when they don't have the expectation. I think they've always like proved. You go back to 2012 against Bayern Munich.
Killing,
they are the team that kind of does. And I think even now, to be honest, like when Chelsea are expected to lose, I think that's when you sometimes see the best performances. But yeah, and then the final happens, and it was an incredible time. But I mean, we'll get on to that. I mean, I always we were talking about it earlier. I remember the team sheets coming out and thinking, oh my God, there's a chance.
Well, let me ask you this before we talk about the team sheets. Where were you guys for this game?
I was very lucky enough to be taken by Chelsea to go work the final.
Okay, look at you.
So I was at Porto.
Look at you. Okay, Zach.
It was cool. We were mentioning it as well. I had my best ever steak out there in Porto. But it was a weird time. Like, it's mad that you kind of forget and how quickly time moves on and things catch up, watching games without a stadium, without crowd noise, and then finally this was the first game, one of the tester events from them, like a tester event. I remember having to like have all the jabs and everything, like the things go up my nose to like go over to Porto, and
feels like a million years ago, honestly.
Yeah, genuinely, man, it's mad how long ago it was now. But yeah, I was very fortunate enough to go out there. I remember getting the call, and I was by one of the Chelsea staff saying it would like take you out. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, I was obviously so young for 2012, so I wasn't able to go to that. But yeah, just to have the opportunity to go to a Champions League final was incredible, absolutely incredible.
I was working for City as well, but not actually out in Porto. So City, I think it sort of shows how much they were hoping and not expecting to win. They'd set up the Academy Stadium across the road, like about 4,000 seats on the pitch. They had a massive like Titantron. I'm not kidding. Could have hosted Raw on there. It was ridiculous. And I was actually came on as a guest as well, alongside Kolo Torre, wildly spoke as well. But I was there doing punditry in their own little studio, and they had socially distanced seats, and I was there with like Sean Goater was there, one of the guests as well with me. And I think everyone expected City to win. They had a big, massive pyrotechnics display planned and all that kind of stuff. If you won it, I mean, you have to prepare for it.
Of course, yeah.
You can't be like,
we won the Champions League, but we don't have anything ready for it. Yeah.
Get some party poppers out. You know what I mean? They have to do something. And but the whole city was prepared for it. 5,000 people were sat on the pitch in chairs because obviously we have to be socially distanced, and it was a surreal experience. I still remember when we got the text about the team, and we got it a bit early because when you're doing the studio stuff, you find out a bit early. And honestly, the cope in the studio, we were pretending to understand it. We were like, "Where's Fernandinho? Where's Rodri? Oh, he's getting Sterling in." Right, okay, and the professionals, the people who play football, we were all sat there. We were nervous, we were anxious, and that was when we were all thinking prior, don't do anything, Pep. Don't do anything, Pep. Don't you dare do anything silly. You've had about 2 weeks to think about this. Just don't. And he did, of course he did. But you could feel it as well. You can almost tangibly feel that you see people on the phones checking the team and going, "Oh, okay. No, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing, Pep."
Do you think because of the games we played, the weeks leading up to it, obviously we had the one.
1 billion
%. Do you think that's what got him thinking about that? The Alonso chip last minute goal at the Etihad.
I remember Ziyech, and that was FA Cup.
Yeah. Aguero trying the Panenka penalty.
I was fuming at that. I was absolutely fuming. So I definitely feel that played into it. Pep's a genius, but obviously what comes with the territory is if you're a genius, and you're left alone in a dark room somewhere. You're going. His little brain just goes and goes and goes, and he came up with something because he felt like he had to fix a problem that didn't necessarily exist. And I could rant about this all day.
That first half, I remember City being all over us and genuinely being like, "Oh my God, we could lose 5-0 here." In the game where we draw 2-2 just before.
Let's look at the lineups real quick, right? So Ederson, Kyle Walker, Stones, Diaz, Zinchenko.
Yeah.
We're good with that?
Yeah, I remember, sadly.
Bernardo, Gundogan, Foden, Mahrez, De Bruyne, Sterling. On paper, if you're playing with this lineup in FIFA, you're probably doing this because Roger doesn't have enough pace. Fernandinho's slow.
What the difference was, basically. So prior to that, I didn't really chat about it in too much detail, but when we were beating PSG and so on, we had all this fluid front line where we'd have one of Fernandinho or Rodri alongside Gundogan a little bit deeper, and then you'd have a combination of Foden on the left, Mahrez on the right, or it might be Bernardo depending on the game, or De Bruyne. Any three of those four.
Yeah.
But Gundogan was usually alongside Fernandinho or Rodri, and we had this sort of like quasi dual triple false nine thing where all these players would sort of vacate
Gundogan, I think,
space.
was the top scorer that season.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to watch because Aguero was injured and Jesus was in that team in various roles too, but he didn't quite grab the shirt as a striker. But it was so much fun. And what Guardiola decided to do here was he sort of wanted to get... because we'd struggled against Chelsea, but the frustrating thing is that we'd lost 2 games to Chelsea prior, but each time it was a heavily rotated side. Like, for example, we just, I think we played Champions League games or whatever prior, and we lost to Chelsea in the FA Cup semi-final, but we changed 9 players because we just played Dortmund. We lost them in the league, but I think we were resting for the PSG game. And like Guardiola got in his head about breaking Chelsea's incredible defensive line. But the argument for me as a City fan was like, but you haven't played your side yet. You're reacting to a situation that hasn't actually happened. That's irrelevant. These players that were playing this great football, they were looking at City with 7 changes going, oh my God, we can't break Chelsea down. Morris didn't care. He wasn't in the lineup. De Bruyne didn't care. They weren't playing. Yeah. So that was the change for me. So Phil Foden went from being a flying left winger, which feels weird to say now, but he was. He was up and down the touchline for City, to playing sort of inside left false 9 with Sterling suddenly on the wing, which hadn't happened for a while. Gundogan suddenly became the deepest line midfielder because the idea was that he would play it forward and so on. And this is the start for me. 59 out of the 60 games prior to this game, one of Fernandinho or Rodri had started. So suddenly Guardiola decided, in the biggest game of some of these players' lives, to add that pressure. Look, I don't know much. I'm not a tactical expert, but I do know a thing or two about people. And one thing I do know is that if you've got one of the biggest moments of your life, do not add any sort of confusion. Do not add any new variables. You just want consistency. It's like if you got your driving test and suddenly they give you a totally different car. You're like, whoa.
You're not going to drive a wheel today. You're actually going to give
It's the thing is, to me, the argument was, Gundogan's done that role before. He hadn't played it for 14 months. And I'm sure, if he'd given him 5 games prior to pick up that role, you would have got there. But when you're playing and you got to a Champions League final, you've got there on merit. You've got there playing a certain kind of football. You've got there playing this glorious football. Just let muscle memory do its thing. Do not add new variables. Psychology is so important in a game of this stature. And what the mistake, in my opinion, I'm not going to teach Guardiola how to suck egg because he's the greatest of all time, in my opinion. But I think he didn't consider the human aspect of it, where these players were so set on their roles. And in elite football, all it takes is 1% hesitation to lose a game against a team of the quality of Chelsea. And if these players at any point in a game of that magnitude, like the biggest in the club's history at that point, have to think, what am I doing again? Yeah. Where should I be again? Then you've already lost at that point. Yeah. And too many of these players, De Bruyne suddenly had his back to the goal, playing as a false 9, as opposed to being maybe behind Phil Foden, who was playing it a little bit more. Gundogan was playing deep all of a sudden, so they're the patterns of when the defenders should push up alongside the midfielders, whatever. It all changed basically, and I think we lost the game before it even started. Chelsea absolutely deserved it, but Chelsea played consistently. You played the same. I was
going to mention that, right? Like it's the complete opposite, right? You have played a mismatched side.
Maybe Kovacic might that's the only one.
But you have to be real, Zach. This is the side that got you to the Champions League. Jorginho and Kante were playing and running teams off the park.
Yeah, I mean Mendy, Aspilicueta, Thiago Silva, Rudiger, Reece James, Kante, Jorginho. I mean, there would be occasions when Christensen would swap in the defence. There'd be occasions when it was Kovacic. There were occasions.
But you knew if you're playing a final,
that's the team. That's the team.
No, exactly. Yeah, Jorginho, Kante, Ben Chilwell on the left, Kai Havertz, Mount, Timo Werner. Like it was, and it's so funny how you can look back on it and like whether it actually mattered or not. But I just remember like little clips where I remember being there, and I was sitting in like the press bit, and there being the little TVs whatever that was showing the coverage, and I remember them like showing and again from saying this now after the win, after the matter of fact, like suits my point. It wouldn't have suited it obviously if we'd lost, but I remember like the lineups when they were standing in the tunnel and like the Chelsea boys being like so focused, and you could see the City guys again, whether it actually mattered, whether it actually was like this, but almost maybe a little bit nervous, or like I remember the Chelsea boys silent, all looking dead straight. No one was like chatting to each other. They're ready to get out there, and the City boys were all kind of like looking down a little bit, like didn't really know what was happening. If you're a Chelsea fan, you probably will remember that clip better than maybe a City fan will.
100%.
But yeah, like, when that line, I literally remember being at the stadium, seeing the lineups come through and going, oh my God, we've got a chance. Yeah. Like we've got an absolute massive chance. I remember saying it beforehand. I remember saying it during the build up to it. I remember us all like kind of saying like, what if our biggest chance here is Pep almost Peps himself? and he did that because it had been a thing for Pep.
Well,
he'd done it before.
We're really at the pump right now of like Pep's European pedigree actually starting to be in question because there had been numerous games where I think his fingerprints, like you said, he does start the medal.
Liverpool, Lyon, Spurs.
All games that City were vastly superior to the opposition.
Much better. There was always decisions in those games where we changed things. Not always, but there were mistakes that were potentially avoidable, and it was something that was absolutely following me around. And Pep during that season, and I went back and reminded myself, he talked an awful lot about learning lessons and so on. And look, once again, I'd be amazed if some of those players didn't think, really? Like, can we not
that's
just...
one we got to ask. Pep needs to be asked when he retires and he has his big biography or his big documentary. Someone needs to ask him about this decision.
Game,
and he's got to be like, okay, it's been long enough now, I can admit it.
Do you know what hurts the most of that game for me is that we did it to ourselves. I mean, Chelsea probably could have won anyway, even if we played our strongest side, or perceived to be the strongest side. But the painful thing for me...
it's the what if, right?
It's the what if, absolutely.
Of course.
Look, Radiohead springs to mind. You do it to yourself, dude. That's what really hurts. And that's what kept happening. And I watched my actual video back the day after, and I was like, oh yeah, that feeling. I remember that feeling. And it was the feeling of just frustration, because I don't mind losing. I really don't. I'm old enough to know City lose an awful lot of football. And when that season we were fantastic, and I truly believe, when you take the motivation that it built into the treble win, and it felt so much more special because of it.
Yeah,
but I don't. It's frustrating to lose in that manner where you feel, well, what if we just played the system that had won 21 games in a row, which is an absurd thing to do? And what if we just played a bunch of players who knew exactly what they were doing and entrusted them with their own abilities, and not gone, actually, sorry, Fernandinho, Rodri. Fernandinho, by the way, an absolute club legend.
Yeah.
Like, he should have been the one and not Rodri. Rodri had a good season, but not great. Fernandinho deserved it. He deserved it. He should have been like, you deserve it, Fernandinho. You're great. I know your form's getting you're older, but you are...
I still think that season he was fantastic.
Yeah, he deserved it. He absolutely deserved it. You want reliability.
Well, then go to Kante there. It might not.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say...
we're better than Gunhill anyway. So.
For as much as we're talking about the lineup, though, right? The first opening moments of this game are dominated by City, right? You look at these early moments where Sterling is going through and Foden has that huge chance where Rudiger just pops out of nowhere seemingly and clears it. There were really promising signs for City. So despite maybe some confusion and some worry about the lineup, are those worries almost calmed down a little bit when you see the start your team mix?
It's hard to remember about that, but obviously the ball over the top for Sterling. You start to think, oh, maybe this is why he's in the team, because he's probably the
that's why Pep is doing
he knows what he's doing. This guy.
Who knew?
He's obviously the pacing behind Reece James. He's the only one capable of doing that in the City squad. Unfortunately, his touch, which was the reason he wasn't in the team at that moment in time, was because he was sort of letting himself down in the final third, and that was. That was evident there. But then Phil, of course, a good chance, a sort of semi-chance, because Rudiger got across really well. But you think, well, actually, these players have come out here, they've started really well. We're getting it behind a few times. I think it was De Bruyne who played the pass to Foden, so it was working at him drifting as a false nine. And yeah, he felt, okay, we're doing all right. They weren't like gilt-edged chances, but they were decent moments, and it seemed so lovely back then.
How much more worried do you get when you see Thiago Silva go down?
I mean, it is rough. It is definitely rough. Like, this is somebody who has been a revelation, like incredible, like really shaped this back line, has been the centerpiece to this back three. And also like for the fact that there's no offense to Christensen, but you're already half an hour into a game. The game's got going, and you're slightly worried about whether this is somebody that can step up to the occasion here. Like, he is so crucial from a defensive point of view of leading the line, but also just from like I've spoken to many of these Chelsea players who've said, yeah, look, Thiago Silva, like, he did know English. He does know a bit of English, but he's not leading you through his words. He's leading you through his actions. And you think in the biggest moment, we've already had some defensive moments where guys have had to step up, Reece James being one, Rudiger being one. And you do worry. However, he comes on quite quickly and we go on to score. Like, it's a nice action. And, maybe if Chelsea don't score that quickly, who knows what would have quite happened. But he stepped on, and like Christensen has been someone who, with Rudiger actually as a back four, had been criticised over the years or so. He'd been criticised for being weak. He'd been criticised for maybe not making the right decision, for not being maybe a traditional kind of bully of a centre-back.
Chelsea centre-back when you think of the John Terrys or the Carvalhos.
Exactly. Yeah. But actually, that formation, him being in a back three, where he's got Rudiger to his side, where he's got Azpilicueta to the other side, like, is something that did fit him quite nicely and did suit him quite nicely. And look, anybody that misses... I think out of that lineup, Thiago Silva's in the top three most important players, really, if I'm being crucially honest. Like, I think it's probably Kante... In that the way Chelsea are playing at the moment, Kante, Mount,
and
Thiago Silva.
Well,
yeah, to be fair, Jorginho was actually incredible. So yeah, easily top 4 then, whatever. If you want to throw Jorginho in there, sure. But Thiago Silva had been a revelation for that Chelsea defense.
You think as well too, been there, done that, right? He was in the Champions League final the year before.
Exactly,
with
the
Thomas
narrative,
Tuchel.
the narrative with Thomas Tuchel to have been back there again, and like you want that for your players to use those moments to fight for it more. And sometimes in football games, that is what can really make the last ditch tackle to get you into that opportunity. So yeah, you are slightly worried, but 3 minutes later, ball goes out to Chilwell, and Timo Werner does the best thing he's ever done on the Chelsea shirt and makes a run down the left. Doesn't touch the ball, he makes a run.
Timo Werner can run. That we can give him.
and that's what was so nice. It was mad because I still remember the moment where, because I think the ball comes, I can't remember if Mendy clips it over.
It does, yeah.
Mendy clips it over, and Chilwell
takes that goal a lot of times, haven't you?
Chilwell takes that kind of like perfect heavy touch in order to play the ball into Mount. I remember him playing the ball, and I was like, I can see Timo Werner making this run now.
Dragging stones out.
Dragging stones, and you can see the space just opening up, and Kai Havertz making it in there.
So bad defense.
I still think the ball from Mason Mount was like fantastic. Like it's a really long range ball.
Through. It was so straight. It was,
it was just about making the right decision at the right moment, and that was made by Timo Werner making that run, opening the space, and Kai Havertz going through. And this, let's remember, this is a Kai Havertz who is not the Havertz of now, who I think is a lot more maybe respectable as a striker in the Premier League. Is a Havertz who still had a lot of doubters, still had a lot of questions around his name. A big price tag. His first season, a big price tag to his name. A much younger Havertz as well, going one-on-one with Edison. And I just remember thinking, and let's be honest here, doesn't have a clean finish. Gets a little bit lucky by Edison.
To be honest, does time stop for you in that moment? Like, is it just a case of like, wow,
I just remember down? Screaming, and let's remember I'm in a press box as well, where this is not what the traditional person is meant to do there. I'm like losing my mind, like, oh my god, and him slotting it in, getting the rebound after Edison gets a touch on him,
slotting it into empty net,
and slotting into empty net. And again, just before this as well, we'd mentioned it when we watched about the highlights. Werner could have had like a hat trick. Werner had chances after chance after chance. And I remember thinking at times being like, oh no!
How are we giving him a Champions League medal? Come on, City. I'm all due respect to Werner. No due respect to Werner.
If we look at that goal,
so poor.
I know it's hindsight, right? And I know it's convenient because of the conversation we talked about earlier, but does a defensive midfielder, does a Rodri or Fernandinho in that pocket that Mount picked up and had time to pick up his head and does he stop that before the injury
I think it's more the team would be set differently. I think Mahrez doesn't get back, and Mahrez should be back a lot bit deeper. He's just sort of jogging back, and then Kyle Walker gets really sucked in, goes towards Chilwell.
It happens very quickly, doesn't
Kyle
it?
Walker, he shouldn't go forward, but then John Stones actually just sort of ends up standing next to Kyle Walker weirdly. Stones had a stinker in this game, unfortunately. When I watched the highlight back, obviously for the first time in about 3-4 years. I'm not even kidding. I've not been near it. And I thought, oh, Stones, you at the scene of crime an awful lot. Like Werner ran him ragged with all people, and that was obviously his then personal motivation for 2 years later to have the most absurd display I've ever seen from an Englishman in the Champions League final. Stones is a sensational gate centre, but he was poor. And then Zinchenko was doing this quasi left back thing. It wasn't necessarily his fault that he was caught not tracking the run. I mean, he sort of wasn't, but I think the problems came a lot further up the pitch, and Havertz was on him. And
is Chilwell making a run down the other flank? Sorry, not Chilwell. Is Reece James making a run down the other flank?
I can't remember.
I'm just trying to remember why Zinchenko gave him so much room.
Well, Zinchenko was actually with him, but it's just Diaz has got pulled out, and Stones is actually midfield doing nothing for some reason. He's on Stones and Walker.
Zinchenko's not a good defender.
No. I'm just trying to see whether I can give him an out.
It really actually wasn't on Zinchenko and looking back, because he's the guy closest to it, but largely it's the midfield and on the right side, no one, Walker and Stones. No one's gone near him out to make the pass at all. No one. And Gundogan was actually sort of in the centre of the pitch, and he's not probably read the danger of getting close to Mount, and he's just doing nothing. There's a big old he's 10 yards around Gundogan around the centre circle. 100%. It was just a weak goal, and it was uncharacteristic of City that season. We were so solid. We'd built that run off being so devastatingly good in possession, where we kept the ball and we were good defensively, and just
I wonder if, because just before that, as we mentioned, Werner has had a few chances from going down that left.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's where the defender's thinking, God, we can't keep letting him come down here. I follow him, but obviously,
and knowing Thomas Tuchel, that's something he would have identified beforehand and said, let's target that. And Zinchenko, 100%.
We've done it a few times, trying that long ball, trying that ball over the top, whatever it may be, and it had come off quite a few times.
Second half, and I mean, there's a few moments that kind of marked this game, right? The Bruyne injury is one of them. But for me, a big thing, and we'll talk about the Bruyne injury, but a big thing for me was just like, sometimes in football they say you can score too early. I almost felt for that Chelsea team, scoring at that point was actually perfect for them because then they could kind of just settle into their shape and just frustrate them. Like I felt like Chelsea were a team under Tuchel that weren't afraid to suffer off the ball.
We were really good defensively in the Champions League. Like we'd managed to suss it out really well. Look, any team that has N'Golo Kante in their midfield is going to be super beneficial defensively, and also going forward. Like I still don't think he gets enough credit for that side of his game, but he was and he is superhuman. Like there aren't many players who, when they're playing, it feels like you've almost got 12 players on the pitch, just due to his running power, just due to his stamina, his ability to win the ball in scenarios where you question how's he come out with that. And I think to the opposition, like when you have someone playing like he was, I'm pretty sure he got man of the match on the day. I think
he got a lot of man of the matches in that Champions League run. By the way,
he was saying before, it's a safe bet.
But to the opposition, there are going to be times where he just frustrates you.
He almost had a force field at times around him, like gravitational pull towards the ball.
And this is also somebody as well who. It wasn't Kante a few years back, where he was never getting injured. Like he had a few injuries at this point, but he was just again like superhuman to him. And I think Chelsea had. I don't. If you guys ever think about Chelsea classically, at least since the 2000s, they have been a side who especially under Jose Mourinho, who have enjoyed defending, who have liked to defend and wanted to maybe play on that counter. And again, I think Tuchel had used that energy and used that history of Chelsea to get the best out of this side, and they don't mind absorbing pressure. The defence were really on it. We mentioned Christensen earlier. He slotted in really, really well, did a good job, and it wasn't like Reece James was bombing down the wing every single time. They were a bit more reserved once they went 1-0 up. They weren't, and if anything, like that's when later on you see them bring on say Pulisic and wanted to play on the counter still and set them off. That was always the game plan. It was always the game plan. It's how we scored the goal. It was always the game plan of being defensive first and playing City on the break.
We had no answer, to be honest, unfortunately. I mean, looking at the highlights, Mendy barely had a save to make, unfortunately. A couple of moments where a cross, it just evaded the forward or whatever. But there was very little that City created, and I think the De Bruyne moment, him going off as well.
Is that the catalyst right there? Like
that it felt is the manner of how you just feel something. The fact that we'd started with that hesitancy with the lineup, we'd gone a goal behind. Then De Bruyne, he looked a mess when he went off the pitch as well. He was downtrodden. His face was an absolute mess. He looked like just broken.
I think he went to the Euros later that summer, and like honestly, he was completely off of it. Like
it turned out he'd had a severe nerve damage to his face, which is ridiculous. Like he'd had a broken jaw or whatever, and he needed like real surgery and stuff. So he was severely hurt, and the City sort of tried to restructure themselves, something more familiar. Fernandinho came on for Bernardo Silva.
It's too late.
The shape went back to what we sort of semi-knew, but we never really recaptured the confidence. And Chelsea at this point had really settled into their defensive rhythm, and there was probably no side in world football at that point you want to try and break down more than Chelsea.
They love to suffer.
And Mendy that season as well. I know we didn't have many options, but like even Mendy that season,
no, he was great.
He was again superhuman. Like Mendy for that year was a joke.
That was one of those. That was such a weird rise and fall for Edouard Mendy. Honestly, he came really from nowhere.
Yep.
Had a year or so where he was just unstoppable. I think he won every award for a goalkeeper. And then just disappeared off the face of the earth.
I'm done.
He said, my work is done. He won AFCON with Senegal and then said, you'll never
following
see me
season,
again.
he had a mistake against Leeds. He went to Saudi. But he had mistakes at Leeds. I remember the West Ham mistakes as well, like tearing my hair out. But that season,
I still respect it.
He was
here for a good time, not a long time.
Not a great long time. Absolutely incredible. But yeah, it was an assured performance.
You mentioned not too many chances, but there is that one at the end. And it falls to maybe the one player throughout that Champions League run you would have wanted it to fall to, right? Mahrez had really built a nice European resume that season. The big goals against PSG, both home and away. I think he even bagged against Dortmund. And that chance, I know it falls to his right. Mahrez, of course, notoriously left-footed. But even for a second, did you think, oh...
Well, there's the 96th minute at 97, and Aguero had been brought on as well, sort of desperately. We already knew as well, and I say desperately, but we'd already knew Aguero was leaving at this point. They'd announced that he was going to go, and this was his last game. And the fact that the chance fell to Mahrez as well, and not him, because if that forced Aguero, that's going in. It just is.
That's fate.
Yeah, he's putting it back at the top corner, but it fell to Mahrez, and fell to his right foot. 96th minute. it looks far away until you see the other angle. It's only about not even a foot, maybe.
I still remember I can still feel the feeling now of what I felt in that moment.
Same.
And it was horrible.
It was utter, because I was sat with like a few thousand City fans. And that's the bit where everyone knew we'd lost. It's weird because you have the final whistle before the final whistle. You have the real one, but you know you're not going to get no chance after that. Yeah, and it's such a demoralising feeling. And the players probably would have been relieved just to hear the whistle at that point. But you try and find something else you can do for another 30 seconds. But that was the moment. You can see in Morris' face, he sort of sunk to his knees as well. And it felt at that point there was no real return from it. And
post that, I knew we'd won it. That's what at that moment.
You could tell.
But it was closer than we'd like.
I think the
second, there wasn't even a great chance. That's the thing.
Half volley,
but I think we didn't deserve it ultimately. You know, like we just
I think if you actually look back at this, I'm sure watching it live, you're nervous, of course, and you're thinking, "Oh, City, any moment now." But if you actually watch that second half back, at no point does City really look like they're on the precipice of breaking you down, or a chance is on the way. It really just felt like we were frustrating them.
It's so funny because, like, in the moment, like whenever I'm watching a game live, I'm always worried, And then whenever I remember watching the game again back on afterwards. At home the day after or so, and being like, oh, that chance was nowhere near as big as I remember being, or like there was, we're actually really good in this stage or whatever. So it is always like, which I think you actually sometimes see in real life nowadays.
There's two games of football. There's the one you watch and the one you look back at afterwards. It's never the same. It's never the same.
I think TV as well, like sometimes gives you a bit more of a, like just the fans around you and how everyone is feeling at the same time. The atmosphere. They're like, the people standing up, getting ready to see if the chance
how
gone
often in the game do you go, and you're like, the shot's 40 yards away. At the times that was a big chance. Come on, guys. Like, it feels big at the moment.
Exactly.
But you feel the same for the players, and that's the point, isn't it? If it feels it, then it happened, But that was, looking back now, the only thing I have any real sort of aggression towards, away from Pep's decision, was probably just the Rudiger thing on De Bruyne, because it felt violent, But I've watched the replays back with you guys pre it. And he's firm, but he's
coming together. Isn't
it's what you'd probably expect from a centre back who's tough in the Champions League.
I think he's trying to stop him. I don't think he's trying to hurt him.
I don't like him because of it. Obviously, I'm obliged to say that.
I respect that.
I've been told by the producer to cut the words out that I won't
use. We respect that as well too.
but that's it. And if that's someone we're really getting at that point, well, you've got no real complaints. There wasn't any egregious decisions against us. Maybe he could have had a record. I don't know. But either way, there was nothing where I go, well, what if the referee gave a penalty for that? It wasn't. The Reece James wasn't a handball. I don't think it was. I think it came off his chest onto his arm. We didn't create enough chances. If we were peppering the goal and we finished and let us down, we didn't even do that. Ultimately, that's why for City fans, the argument always comes back to what happened prior to the game when he handed in the team sheet, because that feels like the only real explanation for this wonderfully gifted team to suddenly just not create any chances.
Yeah. What's the final emotion when the final whistle blows?
Just devastated. And then, because then I had to go on camera with all of City's production, and we had to sit there and sort of the presenter was crying. I felt so. She was lovely, but she was so. She's a big lifelong City.
But I think this just shows everyone at City thought they were going to win this final.
But she cried off camera. On camera she was absolutely fine, but she was a lifelong City fan.
I love
that to be. She's awesome, but she was devastated. And I was sat there like, I've got to be a presenter now. I'm just a fan. I was new to this YouTube game, and I was there like, I didn't know what to say. I was there like, good game, lads. I was devastated.
What's the analytical breakdown of that?
Do you know what happened as well? So we left the game quite late, and my dad was in the stands, and my wife, not then wife, about to be wife, was there in the stands as well. And I met them afterwards, and they were waiting around. For some reason, outside the academy, some just utter COVID nutter, conspiracy theorist, just started to try and waffle at us, and I went, not now, mate. I was there I went. I
just pretend to be interested in a different thing.
He started talking about bad game. I was like, yeah, but then he just started going on about some. Because I literally just looked at him and went, not now. I was so angry. I was there like, don't you dare do this now. I just remember that feeling of just wanting to. I'm not a violent person. But I was like, just not now.
I'm starting to wonder actually.
It's just not now. Because I actually got really good. I got inspiration here. But I remember just the feeling of just also just. It was just because I remember as well thinking, I'm working with the club I love. I've been watching City since 1994, my first game, and it could be Champions League celebrations, and I could end up being with some of the like the players, I could be doing anything. And I was there dead excited, like this could be like the best day of my life, because as a football fan, I'm there working, like obviously for you it was like...
This is what happened to me. This is basically what happened to me.
This is the duality of man, honestly.
I know it sounds weird to say that because it's a very self-absorbed thing, but I mean it in a nice possible way. Like, this is my dream. I'm there, like I'm about to like celebrate with 5,000 City fans, and then hug Sean Goey, who was my hero. Not hug him, obviously. High five, elbow touch from a distance. I'm about to do that, and then obviously, my dad's in the stands. They just see me on screen with Colo Torre. I started a Colo Torre chant for some reason. This is going to be an incredible day. I got my profile picture named up next day of me on the screen, and then obviously, then I was like, oh, actually, we lost.
And it's the worst day of my life.
Yeah, but obviously that sounds so self-absorbed. But I mean it in the most honest sense possible.
Yeah,
when you're this is the dream.
Yeah.
Like 15-year-old me now is like, Stephen, well done, mate. You know what I mean? You've done it. You've won it. You watched your team in the Champions League, and you got to do it with your hero as a kid, and with your wife sat there going, "Go on, Stephen, well done." I'm like, this is amazing. And then obviously the pain
Pep's
of that
decision to bench Rodri ruined all of
it. Damn you, Joseph Salazar.
I was gonna say, he kept mentioning it, and there was a lot of vim in Stephen's voice. Like, why is this so personal to him?
No, to be honest, I'm not gonna lie. The overriding thing was just frustration not winning. I would have rather been sat in Peru on my own in a dark room and watch it than be the other way around. Because obviously that's the most important
it's brutal,
thing.
man. And we had that. I remember.
I wanted City to win first and foremost. The other stuff was just the biggest cherry on the cake. And I was like, this is gonna be incredible.
I was gonna say, Zach, what was it like for you? You're in the stadium.
Look, how old was I in 2008? 10-year-old Zachary was very happy.
You were 10 years old.
I think 08, something like that.
23.
09, something like that.
I was 10 as well.
No, I was so old. I was young kid. I was basically having the experience that Steve was imagining. Afterwards, me, Jason Cunley, and Pat Nevin were having,
which is great. So
good. All things come around. But me and some Chelsea icons were chatting about afterwards, just in emotionally drained, but with happiness. I think I had a little cry as well. I can't remember if it was during the game or post game. I think it was post game. Then I was on Chelsea's YouTube
COVID
stuff.
Was emotional, by the way, as well. It's worth adding that angle because COVID, going back to what I was saying, there was an element of stir crazy, lack of social interaction. And I remember, I was doing the watch long because I couldn't go to the game. And I remember the PSG game going, I'm going to watch Champions League final with my dad. And I got emotional. I cried at the thought of that, because he was the guy who took me to my first game. So that definitely added to 100%. It was a weird time.
And it was Chelsea had gone through so many different eras within a year with Lampard and gone from now having academy kids and the thing. And then I'd managed to, from social distancing, see some of my mates in there as well.
Wink.
And then there's there's the moment where you're kind of also scrolling and seeing all the happiness of my mates and everything back at home.
Yeah.
I'm getting texts from people, calls from people, and then I go to the after party. And I remember there being a moment where
I got a COVID nut and you got that.
But I remember there being a moment where
the victim of the spoils.
Me and Mason Mount were just chatting for half an hour. And just being, and probably genuinely about 5, 8, 10 minutes of it, us just kind of going, we've got I was holding the medal, and we were just we won the Champions League. Came into the Chelsea squad a year ago, mate. And this is what hurts me even more, the fact he's not part of Chelsea now. But just that moment of just kind of we were just chatting about how mad it is. You've just won the Champions League. And I always think how mad it is from a fan's point of view. For him, as someone that's come through everything, and same with Reece James and these guys. And then, it just got crazy. People were drinking champagne at the Champions League trophy. Singing We Are the Champions. Literally the staff, everyone lifting it, having a great time. There's a moment I always think about as well where... we're singing We Are the Champions. Everyone's singing it. The guys, the staff had worked so hard as well for those years. The people who, whilst everyone else had doubted them, had gone on to go and do it. And I remember looking out in the back, everybody, and I mean everybody, is there singing We Are the Champions, lifting the trophy, getting the photo of the trophy. And I remember looking in the back, and there's one man sat over there, and it's Thomas Tuchel. Who's literally got his daughter asleep on him because he hadn't seen his daughter for 3 months.
Wow.
Because they were, I think at the time, maybe not 5 or 6 or so, maybe a little bit younger. And he obviously, because they were still in Germany because of COVID and stuff like this. And I remember seeing that, and I was just wow, he's got all this celebration there. He's over there. It's just a cool little moment. And then, there are lots of others, like where there was also the other side of it where Billy Gilmore, who turned 18 during COVID and now could drink, was drinking beers like there was no tomorrow. It was mad.
So who was looking after Billy? Oliver so make sure he gets a taxi.
it was incredible, man. It was really, really nice. And I think it was it's something which, that alone for me is like money won't buy that. Nothing will ever give me like that moment again. It was just incredible. So I can tell my kids about it, to be honest.
I got a few categories and questions for you guys. What's the moment of this game for you that it defined really how the game went? Obviously, we could talk about the decision before the game with Rodri, but in terms of...
probably for you, for City, definitely, I think it probably is the decision before the game.
Yeah, it is.
How often have we spoke about that already?
And I think that it was sort of reflected in the goal, and the goal looked like it was a bunch of positional errors, and I think it's definitely the lineup prior, because there was nothing really of major note. You could talk about the De Bruyne thing, but I don't think we were necessarily... Okay, he was the best creative playmaker in the world at that point, so he could a very good chance.
The
thing is, De Bruyne, I always said at the time, De Bruyne was brilliant. Like, he'd play an entire game and his radar would be off. Then he'd just do something that no one else could do. Like, he'd just put it in the top corner from 25 yards through anger, or he'd play a pass, that. So that's the thing. If De Bruyne is on the pitch, you're probably going to do something special at some point. And he created a chance of Foden in the first half. So it's very possible and plausible that if he's on the pitch, he does something brilliant. So I think that's obviously a pivotal moment. I think the fact that he hadn't really done much and he wasn't playing well and he was in the wrong position probably makes it feel, from a City fan's perspective, that was less likely. But I think it's almost certain at some point they would have changed it and he would have gone deeper again and been more himself, So it could have been that moment, but it felt like beforehand for me.
I think from a Chelsea point of view, like... If I'm being maybe a bit hipster and I want to go like, the Rudiger tackle, but ultimately it is the goal. Like it really is. Like, Werner has a lot of chances, sure, but it's that ball that I just always remember Mason Mount playing through the gap. It's that, the moment is Timo Werner's run. That's the moment.
Yeah.
Timo Werner's run, the space just getting wider and wider and wider.
Why did Diaz follow Timo Werner? Just leave him. It's Timo Werner.
But it's that run and kind of seeing like, oh my god, I can see a pass here, and it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like realization is unfolding.
Exactly, and then you can see like, oh, Havertz is making the run here, it maybe it's the moment. It's Timo Werner's run, which is not too bad.
Was there a player, or rather, was there a moment watching it back, which again you haven't done in quite a long time, that maybe you had forgotten about and almost remembered on second watch?
For me, it was the De Bruyne. I kind of completely forgot about the De Bruyne, which I guess is so...
The injury.
The injury. For me, I completely forgot about the injury.
How dare you?
Completely forgot about
Forget about Kevin De Bruyne getting injured. For me, it was probably genuinely the De Bruyne injury. I completely forgot about it. I forgot Jesus came on earlier than they did. I know that sounds silly.
I have no recollection of Jesus playing that game.
No, same.
And I remember Aguero coming on. I remember Fernandinho. Jesus, I couldn't tell you what he did. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't realise. I'd forgotten we'd ended the game with Aguero and Jesus both on the pitch. I mean, I think I forgot about the Sterling early moment in behind, because I remember the Foden one as the first chance. I'd forgotten that actually, it was Ederson's long pass had paid reasonable dividends early on. So I'd forgotten about that. But not really. There wasn't many things to forget.
Unsung hero of the match, maybe a player that we're going to talk about the main guys, Havertz grabbing the goal, but was there a player that maybe Christensen?
Like, I'm just thinking about that defence, really. Like, I think the thing is, after you win the Champions League, every Chelsea player gets the credit. Timo Werner's run, we mentioned it a million times. Kai Havertz scoring the goal.
Like, a good one, though, right? Because Thiago Silva coming off, I think everyone's looking at that and thinking, oh, that's a big loss for Chelsea right there. And he held his own. And, there's been a lot of stuff spoken about in the media about like Christensen getting quite like nervous for big games as well. Like, there's been multiple times where he's, had to be a last minute change in a lineup. So that could be part of it. I also think maybe whether that was like a game that really kind of started for making people take Reece James serious as well. It's funny looking at that Reece James because he looks so young there. Obviously, what's funny about that? That was the first time I think he rocked that hairstyle.
Yeah, it was. The blonde stuff, taking out the braids. But I also think like for him, maybe for him to kind of realise like, oh, I'm now a Champions League winning player. I mean, what's sad is from there, really for years, we actually see Reece James get really badly injured for a long time. He's a little bit different now. But maybe for him, I'd actually be happy to give it to Christensen. I think that was something which maybe he was a bit of an unsung hero. But again, like, I kind of feel like I remember lots of people being like, let's make sure we're talking about Christensen after him coming on for us. So yeah, Christensen, I'll always just say let's give credit to Kante all the time.
Well, I think the next one is really a Kante question. Which player gains the most from this game from a legacy point of view? Does this almost just complete the pile for Kante? Because he's got a World Cup now.
Maybe Thiago Silva as well. Maybe Thiago Silva.
I feel for Thiago Silva in this game because he didn't really contribute as much as he would have wanted to. Like, it would have been amazing redemption for him.
The game specifically.
You know what? I actually think Thomas Tuchel is probably the one who gains the most from a legacy point of view. I think his reputation coming off that
Thomas
Champions
Tuchel is an
League.
England manager if he doesn't win it.
Not bad an assist as well for Academy like Mason Mount, is it? So that's
Mason Mount, okay.
But I think Mount's legacy since then
it kind of gets ruined from there.
I think it might be Tuchel,
I think Tuchel.
Well, is that why you love him though as well? Maybe so. Then is that what started?
I just love for being a Cobham kid, man, and and going on to do so much. I mean, I think Leo's is kind of right. Like, since it's probably been a bit tarnished.
Yeah.
Like, again, maybe could we go back to Reece James? I think Kante is a player that I think the whole football world does respect, and it's somebody that already, like, even if he hadn't won the Champions League, maybe what it would have been was, when they do the 11s of players that have never won the Champions League,
it's like
his
name
Kante's
is up
in the midfield there.
Tell you what, Jorginho got into a Ballon d'Or podium off this tournament. So
he definitely got some legacy points for it.
We just tried to sign, weren't we, the year before? As well?
Yeah, you had. Maybe it's Timo Werner, man. Maybe it's Timo Werner who made his legacy with that run.
What did this game really mean for both these teams going forward? What's the long-lasting impact? I think for City it's interesting, right? Because obviously you return to the stage 2 years later and this time get it done. And I honestly think it's so fitting that you lost your first one to Chelsea, because I have this thing with the Champions League. I always say I don't think the best team always wins it. It's not like the Premier League where 38 games the table doesn't lie.
Not at all.
But I always think sometimes you never win it with the team you think is your best team. So Chelsea is the example I always bring, because I remember that team in the 2000s with Drogba, Lampard, Terry, Jose. Even the team that went to the final in 2008, that was an incredible Chelsea team. And the team that finally got it done was the 2012 one when they were all over the hill, similar to the 2021. And with City, sometimes I think back and I'm like, the team that I thought was the best City team was 18-19 or even 17-18. And then the team that ended up winning the treble, was that the best City team? So sometimes it's a case of like, maybe it's just not your time. You know what I mean?
I think City were the best team in Europe quite a few times under Guardiola. I'm not just saying that. I think the 198 points in 2 seasons, like the football, there was just naivety there. Like, look, you're a United fan. You know how long it took United to under Ferguson.
Yeah.
You have to. I wasn't aware of this really until I experienced it in my club. But you have to learn how to win the Champions League. It's such and it's a club-wide thing. Guardiola obviously knew what to do, but like, for example, Mancini, he won the league for us. He couldn't get out of the group stage, and then we couldn't get past the last 16. Then we couldn't get past the quarters for years. We genuinely took a long time, learning how to cope with that competition, because it's like a state of mind thing for the entire club. I don't know why, but the Champions League has that effect on teams.
But I think PSG is similar. Huh? PSG
exactly.
They had to lose in a
I think
final.
that's just knockout football in Europe. Like, knockout football takes a time to learn to there are many teams who like City, they're the best team in the world. However, in one game they can be beaten. In 2 games they can be beaten. 100%. Like, City have had bogey teams, and City have had moments where they don't want to come up against this specific player, they've got to kind of learn to go around it. And the final, especially the pressure of a Champions League, I always think it, like, from a personal point of view, if you put me in a Champions League final, that is the epitome of football pressure. That's the epitome of having to perform in the moment.
It's the biggest moment.
Exactly. And that is a lot of pressure for some of these guys who had never actually had that pressure before. Kevin De Bruyne is somebody who had been amazing in a 38 Premier League season. Amazing. But in a knockout football, he'd never been there. He'd never had that chance. To be honest, in the same breath, that actual Chelsea squad hadn't really. Like, Thiago Silva had. And N'Golo Kante had been in a World Cup final. Not many of those players actually had that
was the
moment.
one really. That's why I think for me he gained the most.
I think the reason Champions League final is so hard is because obviously it's the quality of the competition, but it's literally the last game of the season as well. So the entire year's work is leading up to this one moment. And when you're you're the aggressor, you're the team that everyone expects to win. And for City, for example, it was meant to be the pinnacle, the crowning moment of this new project, of all this investment, and Guardiola come in and we had all these great players and we'd broken absurd records and won the league, and this was meant to be the moment. And there's no way you won't feel that as a person. It's just human nature to feel that. And I think what makes it so difficult is because it is the last game of the season. You are exhausted mentally. You put everything you've got into it, and then you have the weight of the expectation of the entire club. Everyone's expecting you to go out there and win it for you, and you've not been there yet. You can't predict what it's going to feel like until you've actually experienced it. And it's why so many teams lose their first final, because you sort of have, not everyone, but you sort of have to go through it to an extent. Like, you have to fail better. You have to learn how to win. And I think City as a club just weren't ready for it yet. And I don't think Pep was ready for City to win it either yet. And I think some of these players needed that level of motivation, because that wasn't a team of experienced Champions League players. It just wasn't. It was a bunch of players that were there for the first time, and that it's not like a classic Real Madrid side where they've already had multiple winners in there, and it doesn't matter what the new guys do, because the other guys have done it. Tchouameni's got Modric alongside him. So it's what I mean. It's like, it's different when you've got that experience alongside. I don't know if that's a relevant reference, but it makes sense.
I hear you.
If they had faced Real Madrid and almost been the underdog, I wonder whether that would have been more beneficial to City. Yeah. Like the fact they went in it and everyone's like, it's Cities. Like, I think that put also an unwavering pressure on them that Chelsea just didn't have to deal with. Like, for instance, we think about the Dortmund final recently against Real Madrid. Like, no one sits here now and is like, Dortmund, like they should have won it. Like,
the first half they were all over them.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah. It was not. It was great. It was great, and it could have been an incredible story. But post it and Real Madrid winning, no one sits here and talks about Dortmund, and that's what I think would have happened for the Man City game if Man City had won. Like, no one would have been like, Chelsea, like, how did they lose that? How did this happen? But instead, that does add a pressure to the side as well that City would have had to dealt with.
Whereas when it came to the Inter a couple of years later, like, they weren't. How can you be scared of doing something that you've already done and then won on to win leagues anyway? Like the fear factor definitely was gone, and it felt like they were ready for it, because there was a real grit and determination to change things. And
Rodri started.
Yeah, exactly.
How fitting as well too that Rodri scores the winner.
Well, Rodri doesn't probably become the best player in the world without that motivation, because Rodri, not only was he didn't get on the pitch in that game, so he was signed.
Crazy.
Fernandinho, neither of them started, and Fernandinho got on the pitch ahead of him, which was at the time, it was the right call. But that was definitely his motivation. Absolutely, great players.
There's a lot of City players.
Michael Jordan did. He took it personal. Like, and that's the thing, is like, we didn't know at the time. No one had any idea. I mean, Rodri knew how good he'd become. But that's like, that lit a fire under him, and it lit a fire. John Stones, to me, is a big example. Like, he completed 8 dribbles in the Champions League final. That was the most since Messi in a final. Like, and that was ridiculous. He played this attacking midfield, did his centre back role. It was weird, but that was his response to his poor performance, and the whole team collectively, were up for it in that game, and that was the difference. You could see against Inter, even though Inter were good, but you could feel that we're sorting this out now. We're changing the narrative, and City were just anxious against Chelsea. You could feel it, you could see it, you could sense it, and we weren't ready. And honestly, I'm not just saying this, I genuinely wouldn't change it. I really enjoy the story of football. I enjoy the journey. Like, I watched City being the third tier of English football when United were in the treble, and we got up from the league Division 2 with Terry Cook, an ex-United lad, on loan. Go, then you won a treble, a day later, and that was like the perspective that we needed. But I quite enjoy the humility of that, and at the time, all these young City fans, like, I remember I watched my video back after the game, and all the City fans were just frustrated because their baseline all the younger ones over the past 5 years had been
success.
17, 18, 100 points, 18, 19, 98 points, and like just brilliance after brilliance, and like, that is not a normal baseline, and that season that season already been an absurd success. We were close to a quadruple at one point, that was the narrative, and Chelsea obviously stopped us, with 2 games, semi-final of the FA Cup, and then of course Champions League final. But we were ridiculous that season, and I think, that's what I sort of try and remind myself, is like, you can't have everything. Sometimes you have to lose. And sometimes it leads into those moments which make it bigger. And if we'd won, Champions League that year, I don't think winning the treble how we did would have felt quite as exciting.
I don't know if you even win the treble, I'm not going to lie.
Maybe we don't. Maybe the hook is not there,
The history, I mean, that's also kind of the history of the Champions League. Something like, so many clubs have had the loss in a big moment to learn from. Like Chelsea had it, even Liverpool's Klopp team had it.
Bayern had it in 11-12 at home against you guys, and then came back the next year. Milan in Istanbul 2 years later against Liverpool.
Exactly.
There's so many examples, man. There's not many teams that win the Champions League at the first attempt when a group comes together and plays a final. It never happens, man. I have one last question for you guys before we wrap this up. Is this the weirdest Champions League final of all time?
I think there's a lot that goes into it, isn't it? Like, we're never, touch wood, we're never going to see a COVID football game like that or thing happen. Let's again, touch wood, fingers crossed. Where, the fans were kind of being a tester event, them only being 2.
Yeah.
But how mad is it that there was I think it was over 6,000 to come and watch the Champions League final? That's mental.
But at the time, it was wow, fans are back.
Yeah, literally. That side of it makes it mad. Obviously, the year before was maybe slightly weirder when Bayern Munich went.
That's maybe the most forgettable Champions League
final. Yeah, indeed.
I'd literally forgotten.
Yeah, Coleman. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of again, it's easy to say post, but felt maybe slightly. Chelsea, it was not as written as 2012, but just with how it being doubted at every stage in the Champions League. Like when we pulled Atletico Madrid, nobody expected us to beat them. When we pulled Real Madrid, nobody expected to beat them. And I kind of sit there and I was like, again, maybe from a Chelsea point of view, it feels a bit more like
all English final as well too. You don't get those too often,
not often at all.
Not very good usually, are they either?
Yeah,
no, they're really not.
Not at all. I think ours was decent.
Moscow
Was a good one.
Very good. Yeah, very, very good. Maybe, it could be. It could be.
Probably, it's weird. Which is a weird game.
Final. Weird year, honestly. Weird year of football. Actually, the final question. What's the most 2021 thing about this game? I know you guys are going to say the COVID aspect. You know what it is for me? The false nines.
False nines, yeah.
Havertz, Foden. I felt like that was just we always say football goes where Pep decides it wants to go. And he wanted it to go false nines. Everyone was playing a false nine. Firmino for Liverpool. Tall, lanky number 9s who score goals were out until Haaland brought them back in. No. False nines were the thing for me, man.
Mine is Edouard Mendy. That's mine, mate.
That's the year.
That was his year.
That's his year. Guys, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this one.
I've not. It's been terrible.
It's been beautiful.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. How about that? But it's been a really good one. Thank you guys so much for joining me on a rematch. Guys at home, I hope you enjoyed it as well too. Please subscribe so you can see all the former content we've done as well as everything we got coming up. Like, share, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys very, very soon. Peace.